when it came out, I just remember thinking, this is the whitewash version. This is the socially acceptable way to criticize Bush without talking about Skull and Bones, without talking about Bohemian Grove and inside jobs sort of narratives. This one follows the official narratives and then it just blames it on the usual suspects.
Under the docks, yeah, under the docks. Buried deep, but we're breaking the locks. Footage got clipped, they erased all the shots. They connected dots. Under the docks, under the docks, yeah, under the docks. Yeah, under the docks.
Welcome back to Under the Docks. We're doing one more Michael Moore movie for this month, and then the Michael Moore movie month is over. I don't know if I'm excited or not. I think that I've had my fill of Michael Moore. What about you?
Yeah, I think that more madness AOL thing is kinda wearing on me now, like,
Whoever hacked into that can just keep it at this point.
yeah, it's all yours, bud.
This particular movie that we're going to talk about is Fahrenheit 9/11. It came out in 2004. Again, directed, narrated by Michael Moore. And I have to correct myself. In the last episode, we were talking about Bowling for Columbine and that was the most successful documentary of all. It's actually this one. This is the movie that was most successful of all time. This is the one that made $200 million. It also won at the Cannes Film Festival, which is absolutely unheard of for a documentary, let alone a political documentary. But just to throw in that even Bowling for Columbine was made on like a $3 million budget and it pulled in 60 million. So the point still stands that it was an absolute trendsetter in that regard. This is just the biggest Michael Moore movie that he ever created. And in fact, spoiler alert, he never really climbs back up to this level of praise and hype for any of his movies going forward. This one in particular, Fahrenheit 9/11, is the big one for Michael Moore.
This is his peak. He peaks out right here, and then it kind of everything bottoms out. That's why we kinda, like, stopped right here, so you could probably stop right here on his documentaries as well.
He peaked and then he crashed. The premise of Fahrenheit 9/11 is that it's Michael Moore investigating the Bush administration's response to 9/11. They talk about the war in Iraq, and then they talk about corporate interests behind the scenes that are connecting these dots. He plays up a little bit more of that fear narrative that the media was feeding into from the previous Bowling for Columbine, and he connects that with oil and politics and basically just the Bush dynasty in general. So if you haven't seen this movie, I do recommend it. I don't know. It's actually it's a hard one just because I think I saw this after I had already seen Loose Change or at least some other 9/11 documentaries. So when I saw the Michael Moore version when it came out, I just remember thinking, this is the whitewash version. This is the socially acceptable way to criticize Bush without talking about Skull and Bones, without talking about Bohemian Grove and inside jobs sort of narratives. This one follows the official narratives and then it just blames it on the usual suspects from sort of a political spectrum.
Yeah, and this came out before Loose Change, so I saw this originally first. So for me, it was like a mind blower. But once you see Loose Change, you're like, well, that's cool. It's just that it's the red team's bad, just like a lot of Alex Jones stuff is like, oh, the blue team's bad. It's that bias of political parties instead of actually exploring what happened.
Plotting the course of this movie, not the easiest because it jumps around quite a lot, but there were 5 that really stood out to me. The first one was focusing on how the Bush family had these deep financial and personal ties to the Bin Laden family and to just Saudi Arabia in general, and about how after 9/11 happened, they shut down all air traffic. You were not allowed to just be in the sky unless you had some sort of an official reason to do so and were personally cleared basically by Department of Defense. And wouldn't you know that out of all those people that got grounded, 142 Saudis, they got past that ban and they were able to fly the heck out of this country. So he makes a really sort of specific claim, or at least an implication here, that Bush was colluding with Saudi Arabia and that Saudi Arabia had some other deeper connections that were never advertised, never reported on, and that the media kind of played lapdog to the Bush dynasty as this was happening, and that maybe it was Saudi Arabia behind it. He all but says that particular claim, and this is one of the few Michael Moore documentaries that I've ever seen where he does make some very specific claims on what he believes. I'm not used to seeing that. Usually he just floats these questions and these weasel words like, well, some people say, but in this one, he makes the claims.
And at that time, that was probably one of the more controversial things to say about the Saudis. He brings it up quite a bit. I would say that and the Bin Laden connection with Bush with the Saudis, that's probably the bulk of what this movie is.
And he brings up the Carlyle Group to his own credit. Like, now we're getting into the Alex Jones territory, man. He was just one step away from mentioning like the Rothschilds or something at a certain point, and now we're just getting back into Money Masters. I would love to get Michael Moore's opinion on Money Masters, but that's for another time. Another key claim that he makes in this movie was that the Bin Laden family members were flown directly out of the US, like I had just mentioned. But the real premise is that he doesn't say at any point that Bush planned 9/11, but he keeps asking these questions of, why did we invade Iraq? You know, this is a country that perceivably had no real connection to the attackers. We don't get into the weapons of mass destruction stuff with Colin Powell, and they're pointing out, well, here's where we think, you know, the weapons grade missiles are, and here's where we think. They don't really get into any of that in particular. They just get into that the Bush family knew that there was something more going on and that there were lots of other interests behind the scenes, and that it's kind of spread between them. But that the Bin Laden relatives, in addition to just a bunch of various Saudis, that they were directly connected to the Bush family in so many different ways. And again, if you are an absolute normie, right? If you're going into this just because, whoa, I heard this was the most popular documentary ever released and it's making all these, oh, it won at the Cannes Film Festival. Yeah, I guess I got to see this. Oh, it hates Bush. I guess I got to go and see this, right? There were so many reasons that someone might have gotten off the fence where normally you'd be like, oh, I don't watch documentaries, or I'm not really into politics. They might actually watch this, and now you're walking out like, wait, what? The Bush family, and we trained the Bin Ladens and they were able to fly out of the country. Like, that's kind of weird. It doesn't get to loose change level of weird, but it definitely is sort of like a baby step towards that.
And again, if you saw this in 2004 or 2005, anything pre-loose change, it was a little bit mind-blowing because nobody else was talking about these connections, right? It's getting into that little borderline, like you said, Alex Jones territory, where he's like, ooh, this connection with this guy, and where you're kind of like, he stops it at like the Bin Ladens and some of the oil companies like the Carlyle Group and Hallenberg and all that stuff, but it screeches to a halt. But it's like he's baby stepping. He's like almost there. It's like you're right there, man. Just push it a little over.
He makes another really big claim, and surprise, he goes back to Flint, Michigan, because of course he does, because it's Michael Moore. But he kind of makes this claim about how it's poor and working class Americans that are relied on to fight in these wars, and that politicians and, you know, business moguls, they are not the ones that send their kids off to war. Or you might have just heard the song Fortunate Son by Creedence Clearwater Revival, which basically says the exact same thing that Michael Moore does in this movie. But it is a poignant enough claim to bring up for anyone that hasn't already come across this realization. Is just spelling out the most obvious stuff to, I guess, a very wide crowd about this. But yeah, I mean, this is feels like objective truth. And he asked this question over and over. All these politicians that were pushing for war, how many of them had actual sons and daughters that joined service? And there was only one of them. Out of all the different people that he looked into, only one person. And if I had to guess, I didn't do the deep dive on this one, but they probably got a decent administrative or like an officer level job. They probably didn't go directly into infantry. I'm just guessing though. Maybe I'm totally wrong and they did.
Well, if they did, it was like the black sheep of the family, right? Like, get him into the front lines. We're trying to get rid of him. And one of the points I thought was funny that you said about the songs is in that time, remember the System of a Down came out in 2001. So they were already saying this too. Even that message had been revamped of like, why do they always send the poor, right? And he kind of just echoes that throughout the film or towards the end more.
Well, and speaking of the Bush dynasty, again, some angle that Moore doesn't get into, and I wish he would have just mentioned Skull and Bones at one point. I would have given him so much more credit for that. But if you look into even the history of Skull and Bones, you can see that during that time, the Bush family, they used the college in order to elevate themselves. If you were to get drafted or had to join war, then you can go in as an officer. And a lot of them would go in as flyboys or go in as pilots. And there's so many of these Skull and Bones members that join the military as pilots because they technically never have to get into hand-to-hand combat or in some of the dangerous positions. We're not talking about fighter pilots or bombers. We're just talking about if you're in the sky and doing just sort of like the clerical version of flying things around. It's just another way that high-ranking politicians or business people can get their kids even through the military without ever really putting them in any sort of direct danger, so they don't end up like Pat Tillman or something. The one other of the points made in this movie is how the media stopped doing their job and became complicit. They became cheerleaders for the Iraq War as a whole. Like they pushed forth all of the same narratives the government was putting out. They basically folded over for the Bush White House and did anything he wanted them to. I remember it a little different. I went through that period. I actually remember Bush being openly called Hitler on public stations, the Daily Show and Colbert Report, not being excluded or even unique to them, just like on regular. That a lot of the news stations were kind of gloating the fact that Bush was booed and almost treated antagonistically when he got transferred into power, and he's driving down in his limo, and they almost have to speed it up and get the heck out of there so it doesn't turn into a riot. So some of this is not necessarily true. I don't remember the media 100% being a lapdog, but yeah, no one really pushed into this as much. And for a longer conversation outside of this, but I think that the US and the media learned their lesson during the Vietnam War. They were like, oh, let's not show your actual sons and daughters, being hurt on TV during the time when you're like eating dinner with the family. Let's keep all of this bad stuff off of the TV and out of the news. And then all of a sudden, all the news reports get funneled by the military. You no longer have embedded reporters on the ground that are reporting exactly what they see, because that would definitely harm the war effort.
And that even hurt in Desert Storm, because I remember being young and my dad being he was in Vietnam. He was a Marine, but watching Desert Storm, and he's yelling at like Geraldo, like, what are you doing? You're giving away position, like on CNN and stuff. It was so intriguing to me that, like, I think you're right that they were like, yeah, let's stop doing that because it's hard to sell war when your sons and daughters are getting slaughtered over there, which to his credit that he does show a lot of that in the film.
You already mentioned one of your hidden treasures was the "fool me once, you can't get fooled again" quote. There's a lot of really good Bushisms throughout this entire movie. One of my favorites too was when he's talking about this war on terror and that America must defeat the terrorists. Now watch me hit this drive. And then he goes down and he just goes golfing. And this movie starts out with the fact that Bush takes over the White House, and the country is somewhat in turmoil politically and because of 9/11 for a whole litany of reasons. The government's going through some times, yet Bush is spending record amounts of time playing golf and going on vacation. Although, since this movie came out and made such a big point about how often the government's or how often the president is golfing or on vacation, now any president that ever comes into office, this is almost a new metric, I think, set by this movie. Now we know exactly how much time Biden was on vacation, Obama was on vacation. I know I've heard plenty of articles about how often Trump is out golfing, even while all these tariffs are kind of going into effect. So it is kind of remarkable that this new metric of how many days in office and what's going on and how much golfing is occurring. I mean, I credit Michael Moore for starting this new metric.
Yeah, what a trend, right? And I do love the scene where he's just like, well, he's talking out through it like the first 8 months was just terrible for Bush, and because he paints the picture of how Gore should have won, where his bias is coming in, that he's a liberal. Gore should have won. The election was stolen. That's kind of funny. We've heard of that before. And then he's showing vacation. That song comes on. Like, that cracks me up every time because I was like, it's well timed. That's where I'm like, he's a good filmmaker as that. Like, he knows how to captivate the audience and kind of poke fun and which is super easy. And I think one thing that watching this film back, and we just had the Biden administration, and you're thinking of Hunter Biden, and I'm like, well, was Hunter Biden was George Bush W, was he the original Hunter Biden, right? Like, except he made it to the presidency. Like, Hunter didn't, but I could see a world where instead of Joe Biden, it's Hunter Biden running the country.
Absolutely. I mean, and it makes me wish that there were a more neutral version of a Michael Moore, that we would get a Michael Moore Pizzagate documentary or a Michael Moore Hunter Biden documentary, or just anything that kind of crosses the aisle a little bit. Bowling for Columbine was maybe the closest that we got to, because there was some notes about Bill Clinton, and even when he interviews Marilyn Manson, they bring up this point of, man, isn't it such a nice, convenient coincidence that the election's going to be all about gun control and media violence, and then now, bam, we've got this event that kind of fills both of those roles. So I think that this movie has some of those same sort of undertones that, again, the last movie, there were so many other movies that were kind of bundled up in that one. And this one, at least it is a little bit more focused on just specifically George Bush and 9/11 and these business interests and Halliburton and Dick Cheney. This one is way more focused on that. The hidden treasure, again, I think that it's just all of the Bushisms and the fact that now your normie relatives and people that that you can talk at the water cooler, there might be a dialogue there for, hey, so how about that Bin Laden family being tied directly to the Bush family, and how about these NORAD stand down orders? Like, it's, again, like, the baby steps make this movie fascinating.
Yeah, even when he's talking about the Phoenix memo and the Bush administration knowing back in July about the plans of what Bin Laden wanted to do, I think, again, you have to put yourself in 2004. If you watch it now at what we know, you're like, what? That's basic, bro. Like, you're just paddling in the water. You're tiptoeing, what he usually does, but bringing in the whole every aspect, because he really focuses big time. For me, that's one of the hidden treasures in this, is him connecting the Bush family and connecting all the things of where the administration knew about this prior, instead of just saying like, oh, they knew. He actually made some actual claims and put some evidence for it, instead of what he usually does is like, well, it looks like he said that. And he said like, hey, look at the Phoenix memo, look at what they were talking about, and look how the Carlyle Group and Hallenberg wanted to put pipelines and were connected with the Saudis and the oil companies in Texas. And they even bring up I think his name's Chris Bosch. I think I don't know if I'm getting that one wrong. But he was stationed with George W. Bush, and his connections to the Saudis and the Bin Laden family, they kind of go a little bit extensive for a Michael Moore film, right? It's a deep dive for Michael Moore. For anybody else, it'd be like, yeah, that's shallow waters. But for him, he does a good job.
So is there anything in this movie that you'd consider overboard moment?
I would say the overboard for me was again just Republicans bad. It's always the red team. It's always the Republicans. Where he even starts it out with Gore should have won the election, and it was basically insinuating he doesn't make the claim, but he's insinuating that like, oh, they stole it from him. And again, he goes back to the like race baiting stuff that he loves to do. And when they're talking about I think it's the Patriot Act and taking away the liberties. I may be getting this part wrong, but he has a bunch of Congress people going and they need one senator to sign this off to like, oh no, it's for the actual Al Gore stuff. Yeah, there we go. My bad. Where Al Gore, they have these Congress people that are like, oh, and they're all Black Americans, right? And he goes, well, look, they're still not listening to the Black Americans, and that they were like, Gore should have won this, and nobody, no, not one senator, like not mentioning that there's no, like, oh, is there a Black senator? He doesn't even mention that. He just goes, oh, they just don't like it because the Black Americans are bringing up this topic.
For me, there's not an overboard moment per se. There's not like a specific claim or thing that happens in this movie. It's just that it stops short of getting into any real deep territory. Like you mentioned, it's a deep dive for Michael Moore, but it's not really a deep dive by my standard or even to just a regular documentary standard, I don't think. If you went and saw this, chances are you are ready, either on the fence about Bush or anti-Bush. I couldn't imagine lots and lots of Bush supporters going and seeing this movie at the time. So just seeing this movie and having it be something that you would talk about already kind of declared your own bias in some ways. And I hope I'm not reading into that, but I feel like that was, even during the time when this movie was popular, it was kind of a movie that you didn't see unless you already had some of your own bias built up. And I think that this movie is the epitome of that. It's the epitome of bias and leaning into this. Although that being said, like I was never pro Bush. So I mean, I could kind of see this without some of that extra bias dripping off of it. I wasn't like Team Blue or Team Red or anything. I definitely thought that Bush was behind 9/11. So again, my overboard is just not going overboard enough. Like he didn't go into, and here's why it was an inside job, and here's all the other connections and all the different inconsistencies, which I doubt that Michael Moore is a truther even now. But I would love to see a truther version of Michael Moore. Just like his previous movie, Bowling for Columbine, this movie made major ripples and waves. The previous movie changed Kmart's marketing strategy and product lineup. That's major. This one, as I mentioned, was the most successful documentary of all time commercially. $200 million on a tiny documentary style budget. And because of that, people start taking notice. It paves the way for more documentaries to get even more reach. So, I mean, I do credit Michael Moore with making documentaries something of worth, like something that studios would actually care about and want to put their weight behind. Although I have to throw in that my own conspiratorial bias is maybe this was the plan. Maybe this is the whole media and the government saying, here's an acceptable expose. Here's what an expose. It doesn't look like Conspiracy Asylums. It doesn't look like A Noble Lie. It doesn't look like Money Masters or Inside Bohemian Grove. It looks more like Fahrenheit 9/11, where some things are revealed. We might say the word Carlisle. We might talk about the Saudis and the Bin Laden family, and then demonize Bush in particular, and then kind of leave it at that. I feel like that is such an MSM acceptable version of what I really think goes on behind the scenes. So, yeah, to me, that is the ripple and the wave.
And the ripple for me is like you don't get a loose change, right? I think in this world, I gotta believe that film was inspired, like whether negatively or not, of where you're like, I could do a better job than that, or I can go deeper dive. I think if he doesn't come out with that, you don't really get the masterpiece of what we both agree on of Loose Change. And I think that is also the beginning. And he, for better or worse, he is very influential. And I think it's really the cause of this political polarization that American public lives in now, where it really is just like, oh, these guys are bad. The other guys are cool, right? They're good. They're against the war. They're against all these bad things that are happening, and kind of even kind of dances around. They're against the taking away of liberties of the Patriot Act. And it kind of makes me laugh because you see it flipped after 2020 and all the Democrat people where they're like, yeah, we got to do this to protect us because of a disease. And really the same thing are being said from the conservatives in the film when they're like, yeah, I don't mind getting a few liberties taken away as long as it stops terrorism. And that's the message I got from it, is this polarization started from there. And that's the wave to me.
That's a great point, that we might not have gotten a loose change if it weren't for the commercial success of Fahrenheit 9/11. Or even if there was a loose change, there would be far less people watching it because this opened the door. And I guess also culturally, this movie opened the door to criticizing a sitting president at a much higher level than you're used to. This is no longer a news program or a leaflet or some talk on C-SPAN that no one sees or any of that. This is a incredibly successful commercial documentary, theatrical release, re-release, like promo campaigns behind it, that is squarely pointing their finger at a sitting president and criticizing him. Better or worse, it definitely set a new precedent. There weren't many of these scale of movies ever in history that attacked a sitting president so directly. So, I mean, maybe to its credit that it did kind of make a little bit of waves that way. Again, my tinfoil hat on, it was like, this is the allowed version of that. And that's why it became successful. It was to show everyone, here's the template you're allowed to follow. I'll go first this time. For me, this movie, another really hard call, man. I was surprised at how hard it was to call some of these Michael Moore movie. If we were doing a scale 1 to 10, it would have been easier because I don't have to make like a solid decision. This one, I have to give it a sink, but I have to do that with a couple caveats. Mainly, two main reasons. One is that it pales in comparison to literally any other 9/11 documentary I think I've ever seen. And it's right there in the name, Fahrenheit 9/11. So I was expecting more about 9/11 and less about it being just straight up about Bush and this the same old, unfortunate son dialogue and rich people sending poor people to war. A lot of that was not groundbreaking to me. And I had seen so many other groundbreaking 9/11 movies that I was a little bit disappointed, even on rewatches. Even my first time I watched it, but especially on rewatches, it was just like, man, this is so tame. This is for normies. It truly is, which made sense on why it was so commercially successful, which is the other main reason that this one's a sink for me. It's hard for me to remove myself from knowing this is the most commercially successful documentary of all time. It just does not live up to 1/10 of that hype. If that is truly the way that, documentaries, if this is a metric they're set against, I almost feel bad for anyone that doesn't get as much traction, because this doesn't really do anything crazy for me. Even if I hated Bush, it would just make me be like, yeah, I know, what a jerk, right? But it's not like we're getting some deep dives into the Carlyle group or deep dives into the Bin Laden family. I wish that this 2-hour runtime, he wouldn't have spent a half hour on some things and spent a half hour on Carlyle.
I'm a cop out, man. I'm going to go to my life raft. I'm going to give it a float, man. I'm giving it a float because it was influential for me. But again, it is not in comparison to any other 9/11 documentary. It doesn't focus on anything in particular. Like their main focus is, oh, Bin Laden and the Bushes had a ties, but he doesn't go deep into it to where you go like, oh, this guy knew this guy. He just kind of like, oh, he got the Bin Ladens out of there and they kind of knew each other. And maybe the oil, he kind of suggests like maybe oil is, and that's why they went to Iraq, because they wanted to get the oil and with the Saudis, but he doesn't make the claim. He doesn't have the courage to actually go out there and be like, yeah, I believe it was the oil and this and that and prove it, right? He dances around everything. The only reason it gets afloat for me is because of, hey, man, it opened me up, right? So my bias is like, hey, if I didn't see this, maybe I wouldn't be down this path of what I'm doing right now. But once you see Loose Change, there's no comparison, man. There's no way when you know that all that information was available to him as well. And that this was definitely Hollywood scripted of like, yeah, you can talk crap about Bush because, we're liberal and we're anti-gun and we're anti-war, wink, wink at that time. So it's fine. No worries. But there's no way he's going to make claims of able danger, right? No, it just so he gets a life raft for me, a little float.
Yeah, another great point. Why don't we talk about Able Danger? Why don't we talk about the NORAD stand downs or all the other the passport that's found on Skate? I just wish that it got just a fraction of some of that attention in this movie because of how, and again, tinfoil hat, that's why it got 200 million. This is why it was allowed to win awards, because it was them saying, yeah, you can say that about a Bush. That's what he's freaking there for. He's there to sort of take the fall and for you to point your finger at this one guy that's going to be gone in 4 or 8 years max. And he can kind of, take all of that karmic debt out with him. And it doesn't, like, the stink doesn't stick around on the CIA for longer than the presidential term. So this movie just kind of plays directly into that. Up next, we're going to get back into some conspiracy goodness. We're going to start with the brand new Chaos series, which is all about Charles Manson and MK Ultra and a lot more than that. Satanism. It's going to get pretty deep. It's actually more than just a single documentary. It's a documentary series. So Sean and I are going to go watch the entire series, come back with the same kind of read that you're coming to expect from Under the Docks. And I'm kind of excited about this one because we're going to keep this theme of MK Ultra throughout the rest of this month. It's MK Ultra month now. We're moved on from Michael Moore month to MK Ultra month. And somehow MK Ultra month sounds way more fun than Michael Moore month.
It does. And I think this MK Ultra is something that both of you and I are fascinated about. I think in both of our other shows, we've talked a lot about it. I think even your 100 show, it was one of your top 10 conspiracies of all time, because I think it's a classic, right? We're sticking with the classics right now. We're not going to just jump out of like anything that you don't know about, because if you don't dip into the MK Ultra, what are you doing?
Under the docks, yeah, under the docks. Buried deep, but we're breaking the locks. Footage got clipped, they erase all the shots. Stay connected dots. Under the docks, under the docks, yeah, under the docks. Under the docks.
And all American stickers, cryptids, cults, and killers. We got all your favorite conspiracies, all of that and more on our sticker sheets. Paranoid American stickers, they'll make you smile and snicker. False flags and secret societies, all of these and more on our sticker sheets.
Explore the unique with Paranoid American sticker sheets. Unearth tales of cryptids, cults, and mysteries through each sticker. These won't last long. Get yours now at paranoidamerican.com.
And all American stickers, cryptids, cults, and killers. We got all your favorite conspiracies, all of that and more on our sticker sheets. Paranoid American stickers, they'll make you smile and snicker. False flags and secret societies, all of these and more on our sticker sheets.
What the heck are you waiting for? Discover the extraordinary with Paranoid American sticker sheets. From cryptids in the night to cults out of sight, each sticker is a unique find. Get yours now at paranoidamerican.com.
Paranoid. Yo. scribble my life away, driven to write the page. Will it enlighten your brain? Give you the flight, my plane, paper the highs ablaze. Somewhat of an amazing feel when it's real to real. You will engage it. Your favorite, of course, the Lord of an arrangement. I gave you the proper results to hit the pavement. If they get emotional, hey, maybe your language, a game, how they playing it well without Lakers evade them. Whatever the cost, they are the shapeshift. Snakes get decapitated, met is the apex. Execution of flame you out, nuclear bomb distributed at war, rather gruesome for eyes to see. Max them out, then I light my trees. Blow it off in the face, you're despising me for what though? Calculated and rather cutthroat. Paranoid American must be all the blunt smoke for real. Lord, give me a day away, vacate. They wait around to hate whatever they say. Man, it's not in the least bit. We get heavy rotate when the beat hits, so thank us, you're welcome. Fuck the niggas for real, you're welcome. They ain't never had a deal, you're welcome. Man, they lacking appeal, you're welcome. Yet they doing it still, you're welcome.